Hello, New Hope and friends. Welcome to the online sermon for September the 19th, 2021. And why do I have on a bow tie? Because it is a day to celebrate. This is Heritage Sunday at New Hope, the day when we annually celebrate New Hope's long history. And this year, we are celebrating the 198th anniversary of New Hope, just 2 years short of 200. So that's pretty special, I think. And I'll say this about you, New Hope. I'm looking at you, and you do not look even a year over 180. So way to take care of yourself. It's also a day when we're going to honor our office manager of 23 years, Sally Feasbeck, who is retired now. And we're going to have some cupcakes during the Sunday school hour. We're going to talk about her a little bit and humiliate her. And I will make available online some of the things that happened during that party. Well, I'll also mention that next week I'm going to begin a series of sermons from Paul's letter to the Galatians, and I will cover that letter in a lot of detail over the course of the next few weeks. But in that letter, Paul refers to the Old Testament story that I want to focus on today. So more on Galatians in the weeks to come, but for today, this reading from Galatians 3, 1 through 9. Paul writes, "You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh? Have you experienced so much in vain, if it really was in vain? So I ask you, does God give you his Spirit and work miracles among you by the works of the law or by your believing in what you heard? So also Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Understand then that those who have faith are children of Abraham. Scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles by faith and announce the gospel in advance to Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you. So those who rely on faith are blessed, along with Abraham, the man of faith." Because it's Heritage Sunday, let's go back in time, and not just to 1823, when a group of frontier pioneers gathered on the banks of the Driftwood River and chartered what would become New Hope Christian Church. Let's go back farther than that. Back beyond even when the Western European explorers came to the Americas, bringing their Christian faith with them. Back beyond Christianity's spread from the Mediterranean basin up into Europe. Back beyond Paul's Gentile mission, and back even beyond Jesus. Let's tell New Hope's story by going back through the long story of Israel to almost the very beginning, to the book of beginnings, Genesis, where in chapter 12, God calls Abram, to father a nation. Let's start things there. And what is the setting of Genesis 12? Well, for 11 chapters, what we've been given is an outline basically of creation and the fall. The Maker creates the world in what appears to be just a sheer act of love. God makes heavens and earth fills it all with good and interesting creatures, finally adding human creation, male and female, made in his own image and likeness. They are free agents, sharing care of the world with God while dwelling in fellowship with God. It's just a beautiful picture to start. But soon enough, it goes horribly bad when the humans rebel against the Creator and choose to do it their own way. And how quick after that is the downward spiral. The story from Genesis 3 through chapter 11 chronicles the tragedy of this ruin. Rebellion against the Creator, expulsion from the garden, a son kills his brother, the wickedness of Noah's generation, and then that bizarre construction project at Babel where humans try to build a skyscraper to the heavens. Everything's a mess. A perfectly just but less loving God might have discarded the whole project. Throw the world into a fire and count it as a lesson learned. But this God instead makes a plan to fix what is broken. The plan calls for the creation of a special people, special not because they are better than all the rest, they are not, but special because they have a mission to the world. The people will be called Israel, and the one fathering them will be Abraham. And his call to service is in the opening verses of Genesis 12. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." And then, of course, with very little to go on, Abraham says yes to the plan, which is why there's a rest of the book of Genesis and why there are 65 more books of the Bible. Through Abraham, the story continues, and it continues in a special way. Now, you may have noticed that God's plan for fixing things has two features that I would emphasize today. Number one, the plan requires a set-apart people, a great nation. So, some people who are a recognizable unit. And then two, the reason for this coming together as people, family, nation, is so that, as God says, all people on earth will be blessed through this people. So the family of Abraham will not exist for its own self-glory, but for the good of the rest of the world. I like to think of it like this. The offspring of Abraham then are to function sort of like a conduit. They are to be the PVC pipe through which the goodness of God pours into the broken world. The divine blessing flowing through Israel will water the world and make creation glorious again. And Israel will be a living example, God's Exhibit A. Do you know what it looks like to live in harmony with the Creator and with each other? Well, Israel, through obedience to the instruction of God, the Torah, will show you how. They are the example. And that's the plan, anyway. Number one, come together and be God's special people. And number two, bless the earth. That sounds easy enough, at least in a sermon, I suppose. But both parts turn out to be pretty hard to keep. First of all, it is actually rather difficult to stay together and be a cohesive family with all the pressures of the world. It was especially hard in old Canaan, where the temptation was always to compromise and to blend in with the pagan neighbors. An idol here, a half-hearted sacrifice to Baal, a few pork burgers. And soon you're pretty much like everybody else. And you can't be Exhibit A. You can't be the shining city on the hill when you're down in the valley with everybody else. So, not surprisingly, a lot of the instruction, a lot of the Torah, the law that God gives to Moses, is intent on preserving Israel's difference so that Israel can be a recognizable family. In the Torah, in the law, there is an emphasis on devotional difference. Don't get caught up in the gods of your neighbors. Worship only the one true God and don't even misspeak his name. Reverence that relationship with God. And there is ethical difference. Distinguish yourself from the rest by not committing adultery, not killing, not lying. Don't steal, and honor your parents. And then there are even what anthropologists might call identification boundaries that answer the question, how can we distinguish us from them, from other people in everyday life? Well, we keep a kosher dinner table. We don't eat pork. We observe Sabbath rest. We keep our own unique feast days. And if you are male, have I got some uncomfortable news for you? Yes, circumcision was the hidden boundary marker that all Jewish males bore. So a lot of energy, not to mention some discomfort, can go into calling number one, that call to be different, to be the set-apart people, recognizable as distinct from the rest. It takes work. Why, you can spend so much time tending to what makes you distinct that you completely forget calling number two, that call to be a blessing to the world. Now, I would not portray it as unique to Judaism that sometimes emphasizing calling number one comes at the expense of calling number two. I think it's just a tendency of all social groups that when we spend an abundance of time and energy identifying who the insiders are, we very easily forget or we put on the back burner what is our role to the outside world. And we are no exception to that at all. Margaret Dismore, historian and friend of New Hope, was up in Columbus this week, up from her home in East Tennessee. She used to live in town here. But she's currently working on a history of First Christian Church downtown, and the fact is you can't tell the story of First Christian Church without telling the New Hope story, because we are the church that planted that church in downtown Columbus and funded it until it was up and running and stable. Margaret knows more about New Hope than I think the rest of us put together. And I've been wanting for some time to sit down with her and name off some of the items that future historians of New Hope might want to explore. There's still plenty of stuff to be teased out. And I sat down with her on Tuesday and recorded our meeting, which, by the way, I will make available to anybody who's interested in it. One of the things we talked about was the 1823 record book, our original minutes, that she and Mike Thorne meticulously transcribed into a usable text version a few weeks ago. I'll also make the PDF of that available to anybody who is interested. I'll send it out in the next emailing, and you can look at it or you can delete it. But this, whenever Margaret and I talk about that original record book, we always have a laugh or two about the notes in it on disfellowshipped people. And there are plenty. The congregation would meet on the first Saturday of a month and consider, among other things, the sins of their members. And when there was consensus, they would kick people out. It happened with great regularity, especially in the first couple of decades. Poor Jarvis Gale, kicked out for theft. He's gone. John McKevans, for refusing to settle a dispute with Brother Van Meter. Brother Livy Hatchett and Sister Elizabeth Hatchett are put out for raillery against a brother. Raillery today is innocent teasing, but back then it seems to have been something more like malicious, slanderous talk, gossip. Whatever it was, a lot of people got booked for it. Nelson Roger got excluded for drunkenness and fighting, and in the very same entry, Ann Gilbert is disfellowshipped for dancing. I wonder sort of if those two incidents were somehow part of the same story. But my favorite of all is the case of poor Aaron Beavis. The record says, Aaron Beavis has joined himself to the sect called Methodists, which people have a form of godliness not according to knowledge, and adhere to the traditions and commandments of men. And in consequence, the church, viewing him as walking disorderly and not in the commandments of God, as contained in the scriptures of the New Testament, do withdraw themselves from him. So get thee behind me, Methodist. I think to any modern reader, this just seems like unnecessary hardball, but I think it should be heard in the context of the early frontier, which was a Canaan of sorts, with all kinds of pagan allures. And if job one of a godly community is to be an identifiable people, set apart, unique, different from the world, then a little bit of internal policing is maybe a good idea. Gotta stay clean. But on some pages of that record book, it almost feels like the purge was the focus. Happily, over time, the dismissals get a little less frequent in the record book. Who knows why? I doubt that the people got any better. I'd like to think that there was a more or less conscious effort to get a little less internally focused and a little bit more externally focused. Because, like Israel, Christ's church does not exist for its own sake. It is for the world. And once we've established ourselves as the recognizable people of God, as a New Hope Christian church, the next thing is to become a vessel, to become that conduit of God's love and mercy to the world that is around us. Our continual presence across 2 centuries would suggest that New Hope knew a thing or two about its external mission. You don't survive multiple decades, let alone 200 years, by being obsessed on internal matters. A church only survives by looking outward. And that outward emphasis, too, is reflected in our oldest record book, which through the early years reports numerous baptisms. We evidently tended to the evangelistic mission of the church. That record book also notes within our membership some apparent former slaves. I take a measure of pride in the fact that in this day when so many of our supposed heroes are being exposed for their accommodation to slavery, that our forebears at New Hope were decidedly on team abolition, even helping to establish Northwestern Christian University, eventually named for its abolitionist president, Ovid Butler. We had a role in Butler. At least one of the planning meetings for the proposed institution was held right here. So we were evidently aware of our role in the political sphere, what it meant politically to be a blessing to all peoples. And that record book also notes how we looked beyond our own walls to launch a new church in downtown Columbus, and what today would be called an urban church plant. The work began as Tabernacle Christian Church, and it became First Christian Church downtown, the building that people come from all around the world to see. We had a part in that. Later record books show that the two world wars made the world a smaller place, and as a result, we became more conscious of need around the world, and so turned attention to international missions. That focus has only grown stronger through the decades, so that by the time I arrived at New Hope 30 years ago, New Hope was giving 25% of the general fund to missions. And that's not counting all the extra giving from the congregation that was designated as mission money. My very conservative estimate is that more than $1 million in the last 2 decades has been sent out to various mission works from you. I think we will thrive as we keep that ancient two-sided calling that goes all the way back to Abraham. We do need to exist as an identifiable people, although we're not going to police each other the way that was done at our beginning. We should strive for purity and commitment, unity with each other, a sense of common purpose, a spirit of peace. I think it is absolutely right to tend to this family. And I would add, in this period of facility renovation, that sprucing up things a little bit in the living room where the family meets is probably a good idea every 50 years or so. It just shouldn't be our focus. But we don't stop there. We don't stop with just tending to our body. Merely existing across time is not our final mission. What was the case for the family of Abraham is the case for the church today. We are to be a blessing for all peoples of the earth. And I suspect our continued vitality depends on us keeping that outward focus. Let's continue to tend to the family, but let's always do so remembering that the reason that this family exists is for the sake of the rest. Amen.